Welcome to the outrage capital of the internets. You're watching Smart Remarks.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
So President Barack Obama released the torture memos earlier this month, the official legal justification for waterboarding and other methods of enhanced interrogation. And if you haven't read them, you should. They're fascinating. You know, here are government lawyers talking about parsing the exact meaning of the term extreme pain. Here's the dry legal language setting forth how long a detainee can be kept in a small, dark box in which he can barely move. But the interesting thing is that the debate over these memos hasn't really been about whether these sorts of methods are or aren't torture. The debate this past week in particular has mostly been about whether these methods work. You know, all week long we've got a steady drumbeat for conservatives who have said that even if waterboarding is torture, it produced actionable intelligence that prevented at least one attack. So, in other words, if torture works, then we should torture.
I think the results speak for themselves.
The problem is that based on this logic, why in the world would we stop at waterboarding or walling where a detainee is slammed into a wall, or sleep deprivation, or cramming him into that small dark box and leaving him there for a couple hours? Why don't we chop off a few fingers? Why don't we cut some throats or threaten to cut a few throats? Wouldn't that also work? Wouldn't that produce actionable intelligence? Do you see where this debate goes? You know, once you go down this road, where do you stop? And why should you stop if the entire goal is to produce intelligence that's going to help prevent future attacks? Why would you stop at any point along that road? Why wouldn't you go the whole way down the road? Shepard Smith on Fox News, of all places, made the only point worth making in response to that argument, which is to say, look, this is America. It doesn't matter if torture works. We don't do it. It goes against our values. It goes what we've preached to the rest of the world. It goes against the Geneva Convention. It goes against our own Bill of Rights. It doesn't matter if it works.
We are America. I don't give a rat's ass if it helps.
You know, don't we think that the regimes that had used these methods in the past, from the Nazis to the Khmer Rouge to the Communist Chinese, why do you think they used these methods? But is that the moral standards that we now aspire to? You know, you can get rich from hard work or you can rob a bank. Which one are you going to do? Does the end justify the means? What's the more moral choice? And that is what we ought to be debating in this country when it comes to the issue of torture. How far down that road are we going to go? Should we go down that road at all? Isn't it immoral for this country that has preached to other countries for so long about human rights to do that, to violate those rights? You know, right-wingers, of course, are outraged. They are outraged, as they so often are. But Obama, at least, understands that it's time, once again, for this country to practice what it preaches.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.